Hello, friends. Welcome to the ATC Double Cut. In this episode, I'm going to start off by recommending a few things, some podcasts to listen to, and a app that I think is extremely useful, and I want to remind everyone of its availability. And then I'm going to go through some of the top recent posts on the ATC website. So let's go through these recommendations first. And these recommendations are going to get a link in the show notes. So if you, the easy way to do this, just go straight to the Asian Turfgrass Center website, look on the blog, and look at the recent posts, and you can scroll down and find these. But there will be direct links to all of these in the show notes. The first one I want to recommend is a podcast appearance I had on The Grass Factor. This was back in December. And The Grass Factor is not really related to golf, it's related to lawns. From their YouTube channel page, they say that they explore the science behind why we do what we do in lawn care. We discuss the chemical and biological properties of plants, herbicides, fungicides, fertilizers, and biostimulants, and their use in functional high-performance turfgrass situations. I was so glad to join the hosts of that show, and Matt asked me about MLSN, and we talked about that extensively. I put a timestamp in there to the 33-minute and 20-second point where I started answering the question about describing MLSN in an applied science kind of way, and to state where I think MLSN is applicable to lawn care. Now, we talked about a lot more than just MLSN. We talked about turfgrass university programs. We talked about research. We talked about all kinds of things related to turfgrass management, and it's a engaging conversation that I think many of you might enjoy because it's a little bit different take. It's not so focused on like the golf type of direction that my conversations often go, and so I think you may learn some things and find it interesting to listen to that. I believe that's also available as a podcast, so you can watch that on YouTube or listen to it as a podcast. I also want to recommend, if you haven't yet, Joe Galati's Micah Woods, PhD, annual holiday extravaganza episode from the end of 2024. If you haven't listened to that yet, we had another rollicking conversation, and we talked about all kinds of interesting things related to efficiency in turfgrass management. And many of you will have heard that Joe Galati is no longer recording his Talking Greenkeeper podcast. He is on hiatus. And this is one of the last episodes. I was glad to be on the show for one of those last episodes, and I really enjoyed this one, and I hope that you will also. Now, there's another Talking Greenkeeper podcast that I wrote a blog post about to recommend it. This one has a title, Almost Like a Seminar, and I'll read what I wrote at the start of this post. I said, many of you will have heard the announcement from Joe Galati that the Talking Greenkeeper is on hiatus. A lot of us enjoyed hearing from Joe and his guests almost every week, and we are going to miss it. I hope he will still release the occasional episode. You may also have heard that Joe regards our holiday extravaganza episode from 2023 as a favorite in the extensive The Talking Greenkeeper catalog. So do I. We were both in good form for that one. And I put a link to that in this post. This post reminded me that it is kind of like, when I listened to this, because I downloaded it and listened to it on a recent flight, and it reminded me that this particular episode with Joe is about as close as you can get to going to a seminar with me without actually being there, because the kind of questions that Joe asked were related to things that I often speak about in seminars, and I had the time to explain them in the way that I often would try to explain them in seminars. So I know not everybody is able to attend my seminars, and This is something that I thought was almost like a seminar. It's a good show. I've enjoyed listening to it, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed listening to it again. Not so much just to hear myself, but to listen to my exposition of how I tried to explain things related to turfgrass management. There's another excellent podcast that I'm going to recommend. This one has a title, The Rodney Lingle System, and this is a USGA Green Section podcast with host John Petrovsky, and he interviewed Rodney Lingle, the Green Section Award winner for 2025. And Rodney is a retired superintendent, a inventor, a nice guy, and he is meticulous about producing high quality putting surfaces, and he is meticulous about the inputs that go into that, the products, the machines, the timing, the timing of the work, the setup of the machines and the procedures that are done. And he explains that so well in this episode, and I think that this will be enlightening for anyone involved in golf course maintenance. It's just a pleasure to listen and to learn from Rodney. And John asked really natural questions and just led the conversation in all the directions that I was hoping it would go. So that is a tremendous one that I would recommend. So that is, I've recommended one Grass Factor podcast, 2 Talking Greenkeeper podcasts, and this USGA Green Section podcast with Rod Lingle. So those are 4 podcast recommendations. I think you will enjoy all of them. And if you have any long flights or long drives coming up, that is going to be 6 or 7 or 8 hours of listening material or watching material. So enjoy that if you want to take these recommendations. Now, one more thing that I want to recommend is a app, the OM246 Shiny App Calculator. This is something that I spent a lot of time updating in December, a couple months ago, knowing that a lot of people over this winter and in the spring of 2025 are going to be doing OM246 sampling, and I wanted to make even more accurate calculations, and I wanted to add in a conversion to convert between millimeters to other units that people are more commonly using. So I updated the OM246 calculator. If you've never tried this, I recommend that you do, because it makes a very important calculation that most people are not making, and that calculation that it's making is the organic matter accumulation rate. Once you know the organic matter accumulation rate, you're able to make very accurate predictions of how much sand is required in order to move the total organic material at a specific depth in the root zone to a number that you might want to be moving it toward. So there are 2 substantial changes to the app. I wrote about it in this blog post. This blog post has a link to the app. I'll also put a direct link to the app in the show notes. The one very simple update was to add a new tab at the top of the app, and the title of that tab is Unit Conversions. If you go to that Unit Conversions tab, you can input millimeters, or you could input kilograms per hectare, which you can easily convert then to tons per hectare. And also I put units of pounds per 1,000 square feet, and I put units of cubic feet per 1,000 square feet. Those are some of the common units for sand top dressing. And I like millimeters, because you notice that millimeters is the only one of those that doesn't have a denominator. Kilograms per hectare has a denominator. Pounds per 1,000 has a denominator. Cubic feet per 1,000 square feet has a denominator. And millimeters is just millimeters. It stands alone. It's an easier number for me to work with. It's like if we talked about rain. Rain, it might rain 20 millimeters, or it might rain 7/8 of an inch or something. So it rains that much, and we don't put a denominator on it. We don't say that it's a volume of water. We don't say that it was 20 liters of water per square meter. We don't say that it was 20 kilograms of water per square meter. We just say that it was 20 millimeters. And expressing sand as a single depth allows us to then easily convert it into any unit. So that's probably just a personal preference of mine and a personal preference of greenkeepers in Japan. And we may be the people that like to do it this way, but it's certainly easy this way. But I made the unit conversion tab of the app so that you can easily convert this into units of sand that you might be comfortable with. And I think tons per acre, the American ton and the American acre is one that I may add to this at some point in the future, although I always am a little bit uncertain about exactly what kind of ton is being used. And because of that little bit of uncertainty in my mind, I haven't added that quite yet. But I thought kilograms per hectare is explicit. Pounds per 1,000 square feet is explicit. Cubic feet per 1,000 square feet, that's explicit. Millimeters is explicit. It's very clear what we're talking about. Eventually look for me to add tons per acre with perhaps an asterisk to a footnote so that I can clarify exactly what I'm referring to as a ton and exactly what an acre is. So I think an acre is fine. It's the ton that I wonder exactly which kind of ton we're working with. So that's the first change. The second change is a completely revamped calculation that's much more accurate. And I wrote in the blog post, I said, a second change is a complete overhaul in the calculation of the sand requirement based on a set of user-specified conditions. The solution to this is nonlinear, and version 1 of the app made an approximation of the answer using algebraic calculations. The new version uses numerical approximation to find an exact answer to the quantity of sand required. You can find the code for this, and you can see the type of calculations that are involved. And you can see that on GitHub, on my GitHub account. But the main thing is that it is extremely useful when you have a time series of OM2 data or OM246 data to be able to look at how the organic matter is accumulating at your site. And based on that, you can figure out exactly how much sand is required to either keep the organic material the same or to reduce it or to allow it to increase to a specified value. And that is, it needs to consider the organic matter accumulation rate because the grass is growing and the grass is accumulating organic matter, and the organic matter at your site is also decomposing, and those are happening at the same time. And so you can calculate this, and you can calculate this when you measure the OM246 test. So I highly recommend that app. Now let's blast through one more post, as I think I want to go through the top 10 posts of 2024 really, really quick. So these are the top 10 posts of 2024. There will be a direct link to this post in the show notes so that you can go check them out. Some of these are quite good. I said they're on a nice balance of topics: temperature, sand top dressing, bent grass, and Poa annua, and zoysia grass, and Bermuda grass, playability, and the turf GVX. Number one is one that gets a lot of hits from Google. If you're trying to optimize your website for just for random people to visit it, you could do something like make a blog post with the title "Maps of Average Temperatures in the USA." So this is not all turf people that are going to this, but I think people are searching for average temperatures in the USA on Google, and then unfortunately this blog post is turning up for them. But maybe fortunately it's turning up for them because I linked to the amazing Prism Climate Group at Oregon State University, and they've got a website that will generate maps that you can download, or you can specify your own. You can also have it generate movies or maps of the United States with changing colors based on precipitation and temperature and so on. And there's more on that site than I can possibly describe, but that is a wonderful one. If you're dealing with some extreme weather conditions that have affected the maintenance or have affected the grass conditions, you can go to the Prism Climate Group at Oregon State University. You can very likely find some type of chart that very clearly visualizes what situation you're dealing with, and you can then have that for free use. You just have to give proper attribution to where that came from. This is only available on the website for United States locations, as far as I know, but for anybody in the USA, this is an awesome resource. Number 2 is a post with the title "Annual Top Dressing Amounts," with a reminder that some turfgrass managers have that number, others don't. I recommend that you do. It's a question that I've answered recently. Why is this an important number to know? Well, it's an important number to know because sand disrupts the putting surface. Sand added to a putting surface makes the ball roll more inconsistent. And because of that, I think we should try to minimize the amount of sand while still making sure that we add enough, because if we don't add enough sand, we also end up with inconsistent ball roll because surfaces will get too soft and too puffy generally. Or maybe they'll be too wet because water won't move properly. So knowing the right amount of sand is really important because we're always chasing after that number, trying to optimize it. And if we don't even know what the exact amount that's been applied is, it's very difficult to adjust it. Number 3 was about the Turf GVX, about adjusting nitrogen supply. I gave an equation of how to do that. The way that you can adjust nitrogen supply based on how much the grass is growing. It sounds simple. It is simple, and I explained it in that blog post. Number 4. I was surprised to read this about nitrogen coring and sand top dressing, and I hope you are surprised too. That's what I wrote here, and that was a surprising one, that a publication, let me click through to this one. This was a book published in 2023. It's the Compendium of Turfgrass Diseases, 4th edition. I didn't read it until 2024, and I flipped it open. I looked in the Pythium root dysfunction chapter, and I read this. Now listen to these numbers. This is from the book. Creeping bentgrass should be fertilized with 4 to 6 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. That's 195 to 292 kilograms per hectare annually. Frequent cultivation and top dressing are needed. In general, 15 to 20% of the putting green surface area should be impacted by hollow tine aerification annually, and 5,000 pounds, that's 2,272 kilograms, of top dressing sand should be applied per 1,000 square feet, or 93 square meters each year. That is a tremendous amount of sand. That is, to me, a tremendously high amount of nitrogen. Do we really need, well, I mean, maybe if you're going to add that much nitrogen and force the grass to grow that much, of course you're going to need frequent cultivation and top dressing. If you're going to remove 15 to 20% of the green surface area, maybe you do need 4 to 6 pounds of nitrogen to force the grass to recover, to close all those holes. It seems like a vicious cycle, a vicious circle of kind of chasing your tail growing so much grass and then dealing with the consequences of that. So, and I was really surprised to read that in a book published in 2023. So, of course, I have my own recommendations like MLSN and clipping volume and OM246 and the Turf GVX. This is like a turfgrass performance system that can really help to find the site-specific amounts that you need at your location. And this is something that I would recommend using this rather than those type of textbook recommendations. So that's a good one to read and to consider if you could perhaps be doing more site-specific things that could make the conditions even better at your location. Number 5, this is the kind of green where zoysia beats Bermuda grass. I was playing golf in South Carolina at a relatively low maintenance golf course, and the greens were Bermuda grass, and I got to a particular hole and saw some sod patches of zoysia, and the zoysia was clearly beating the Bermuda grass. And I put a image in that post, and I showed the sections of the Bermuda grass green with some POA, and then I put arrows that pointed to patches of zoysia on the green, and those patches had been sodded in at some time in the past. And the zoysia in that location on those greens was outperforming the Bermuda as a turf grass. Now, the ball would roll a lot faster across the Bermuda, but the Bermuda looks like in that case it would be a bit of a higher maintenance surface in order to produce the quality that was being produced on the zoysia. That's kind of the inverse of what I normally would say. Normally I'd say Bermuda grass is going to be better for a putting surface, but on that kind of course, at that kind of maintenance level, the zoysia was outperforming the Bermuda. So that was interesting. Then in April, I made a visit to Bob Rayleigh at 1,000 Acres, and we talked about phosphorus deficiency, and we made a little video, and we looked at no POA annua on those greens 16 years after planting. That's really interesting. If you're dealing with bentgrass and trying to keep POA out, I recommend that you pay attention to the things that Bob and I were talking about. Number 7 on the top 10 list was the really cool laser height of cut gauge invented by Alexander Grangs, the equipment manager at Shili Golf and Country Club in Shenzhen, China. And he's got a feature on this laser height of cut gauge that puts a laser plane, a plane of light that goes across the top of the canopy, and then you raise and lower that plane, that laser plane of light until it's just showing across the tips of the longest leaves, and then you check where that laser beam or that plane is on the scale. It's really, really cool, and it totally removes the problem that I've always had with these type of prism gauges for checking the effective height of cut, which is if you move your eyes and you look at and you look through the prism at a different angle, you could change what the effective height of cut appears to be. And this type of laser system removes that source of variation. So I thought that was a really cool invention, and I made a video about that and a blog post about it. That is measuring effective cutting height with the laser. Really cool. Another post that cracked the top 10, optimum overseeding time windows, which explains a method using growth potential to identify optimum overseeding times. And this is a fun problem to try to find an answer to, because warm season grass grows in different optimum temperatures than cool season grass does. And you're trying to overseed when the warm season grass is slowing down, and yet you don't want to do it too early because it might be too hot for the cool season grass to properly establish and have really good germination rates and not too much disease right at the start. And then you don't want to wait too late, because if you wait too late, then you won't have enough warm temperature for the cool season grass, the overseed grass, to establish and form a nice turf. So that is a interesting post, one that I would like to explore in even more detail, trying to find those optimum overseeding time windows. Number 9 looks at ball roll after 270 rounds, which is the opposite of item 4 above. Item 4 was the book section that I was really surprised to read about how bentgrass should be managed. And that was saying 4 to 6 pounds of nitrogen and 5,000 pounds of top dressing and frequent cultivation and all of this. And I was surprised by that. And then in item number 9 on the list, ball roll after 270 rounds, that's the opposite, because I was surprised in a good way about the results achieved by kind of doing the opposite of what was recommended in that book chapter. And this was a conversation that I had with TJ Creamer, who's the golf course superintendent at Olympic View Golf Course in Victoria, British Columbia. And then I recorded a video. I wrote about it in the blog post. I shared some numbers about how much nitrogen's been applied. This is a course with 56,000 rounds, and it's a course with 1.2 pounds of nitrogen or 6 grams of nitrogen were applied in 2023, which is not really what you would expect for greens with a lot of Poa annua on them and getting 56,000 rounds. And so you can hear us talk about anthracnose problems or not, use of frequency of top dressing and the types of green speeds that are produced and so on. So that's a podcast, it's a video, and we put a little clip showing the ball roll also. So that is one that I definitely recommend. And I think that video shows the ball roll after 270 rounds. And number 10 is Turf GVX. The Turf GVX looks like this, and that's about what you can expect the Turf GVX to look like at your course once you start doing that, once you start making that calculation. If you're measuring clipping volume, I recommend that you do the Turf GVX also. No extra work for you. It's just something that you calculate. And GVX stands for growth, actual growth versus expected growth. And it turns out to be a really useful tool. You'll find all of that stuff that I've just been talking about in the blog section of the ATC website under new posts, and you can go down and find all of those. So that is the information that I wanted to share with you today. That is all kinds of reading and listening and calculating in the app if you want to. That should be a lot of material to go through if you want to take any of these recommendations and study any of this stuff in any more detail. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for watching. And if, some of you I will have seen recently. I've just been traveling all over the place, and I'm headed to the airport again soon for another trip. So it's been great to see so many of you, and I look forward in 2025 to seeing many more of you at some upcoming events and some upcoming tournaments and conferences and so on. Let's see. I guess now is a good time to sign off. I'll sign off for ATC from Hokkaido, Japan. I'm Michael Woods. Bye-bye.